My step-grandparents tried to take my newborn daughter. This happened over 19 years ago, and I still cannot believe they thought it was okay. At the time of this incident, my husband and I had been married for just over 2 years. I was 25 at the time. I never had a good relationship with my step-grandparent because I was not their blood relation, so they didn't really think of me as a real person. My mother had divorced my father and then married his best friend and had a child with him. I was 11 when my youngest sister was born, so you understand that these people have known me for 15 years at this time. I did not have anything to do with my step-grandparents since I had turned 18. Not a malicious thing, I just worked a lot and went to school. I did not have anything to do with my step-grandparents since I had turned 18. Not a malicious thing, I just worked a lot and went to school. When I was 22, my husband and I got married. We kind of eloped. I had planned a big wedding, but everything fell through at the last minute, so we got married on the date I picked and had a honeymoon at the same time. Only my husband's family could afford to go with us. Fast forward a few years, and I gave birth to my very first child, a beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girl. My daughter was probably about a week, maybe 2 weeks old at the time. I got a call from my step-grandparents asking me about my new baby, so I thought it was just a jovial call to ask me how things are going and see how the baby is. Their first great-grandbaby girl, if they had accepted me as a grandchild, but I digress. They then started to ask me what she looked like, so I told them. They thought that was wonderful. They then asked me what her name was. She had a gender-neutral name, but of course, they did not like that and kept insisting that it needed to be changed. I told them that was the name I gave because I liked. They then started to go on to talk about how I was going to send my daughter on a plane to visit. I was a bit taken aback, to say the least. I kindly informed them, no, I'm not going to put a newborn on a plane to go visit grandparents. They told me that they will have someone to come pick her up at the airport, and all I had to do was sign the papers. I asked, what papers are you talking about? They told me they needed custody paper because they needed to take her to the doctor when she arrived. I informed them that she has been seen by doctors already and has all her vaccinations already. Now, I haven't spoken to them in more than 4 years, and they're asking me to go to the airport and sign custody paper and put my daughter on a plane with a stranger. I kindly informed them that I was doing no such thing, that my daughter needs to be with her mother because I breastfeed her, because it's what's best for her. They told me that I needed to stop and I needed to put her on a bottle so that she would be ready for the trip. I had to tell them no. My daughter is not getting on a plane to go visit relatives in another state without her mother. They told me that I needed to just sign the papers and send her with the stranger. They even said that I could have children later, that I was young and could have children when I got married. I informed them that I am married and that my husband and I are not putting our child on a plane to go see relatives in another state when she's less than 2 weeks old. The conversation started to go really south. She started yelling at me how I was ruining it for her daughter, that her daughter would take care of a baby better than a child. Your aunt can't have children, and you were taking this away from her. That I was stealing her only chance to have a baby. That I'm selfish, self-centered, egotistical, arrogant, and rude. That I could have a child when I'm ready to be able to take care of this said child. That I was too young and needed to grow up, stop lying, and wait till I'm married to have a baby. That this was best for everybody. That I'm going back on my word. They then informed me that they were recording the call, and a lawyer would be looking into it. That I somehow had agreed to letting them take my baby, and I'm now reneging on that. Mind you, I've not spoken to these people in probably more than 4 years. What they're talking about, I have no idea. My step-grandmother then informed me that I was disgusting for breastfeeding my child, and that I needed to just give her a bottle, like a normal person. That I needed to just bring the baby to the airport and sign the custody papers. That I was denying my baby doctor visits because I was supposedly so poor and couldn't afford it. My husband has insurance through his work. Where they got this information, I have no idea. She then decided that it was okay, that I could pump and just send her my milk and they would pay me for it since I needed money because I was so poor. If that were the reason why I wouldn't send my baby, they would at least pay me for that. However, somehow, I owed them my baby girl because 1. The baby is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. 2. It's just what your aunt wanted her entire life. 3. You are a child and you cannot raise a child. 4. Apparently, I told them I would give them my baby, no way in hell. And now I'm lying so I can have money. WTF. I ended up telling them exactly how I feel about it. I told them I was not going to put my baby that I had had with my husband on a plane to visit step-grandparents and a step-aunt that never really considered me as family. The fact that my step-aunt straight up hates me and has made it very well known that she does. When I was a child, my step-aunt told me to my face that I was worthless, that I was nothing, that my father divorced my mother because he couldn't stand me. I actually know for a fact that my mother mother divorced my father. I witnessed the abuse that my mother took from my father. She divorced him because of this. I also told my step-grandparents that I was never going to let them see my daughter because my step-aunt was so cruel to me when all I ever wanted was to be friends with her. All I ever wanted was grandparents that loved and cared about me, but they all made that very obvious that they never would, and I refused to subject my family to any more of this abuse. They started calling me all kinds of names, saying how they were going to sue me, and that they were going to get custody of my child whether I liked it or not, that I was somehow an unfit single mother living in a godly lifestyle. I had informed her just because she did not see me with her own eyes getting married does not mean that I am not married. These things happen every day without your eyes being upon them, that she was delusional for thinking that you can just take my baby without me having any say-so. I told them to never call me again. This whole event was so emotional to me that for many years I worried that someone would come and try to take my daughter from me. I became very protective of her. I would never let anyone babysit her. I now know that these are just crazy people trying to get what they wanted. But how in the world do they think they're going to take her from me? It is beyond me. Don't worry, I do not have any contact with these crazy people. No lawyer or anything ever came of all the threats. I just wanted to write this story and get it off my chest. I want to hear from others that I was actually justified in being the way that I am. I'm so sorry that you had to go through all of that. It sounds like your family is really messed up. I can't imagine how hard it must be for you to hear this from them, especially since they haven't spoken to you in 4 years. It sounds like they tried to take advantage of the fact that you were young and scared and didn't know any better than to just give them your daughter, but you're much wiser than they think. It sounds like you're making the right decision by keeping them away from her. I hope things will improve between you and your family, as it would be very helpful to your daughter to have grandparents in her life, but only if they are willing to accept you and her. Entitled Grandmother Opposes Our Relationship. Okay, let's take the proverbial cat out of the bag and slam it against a wall. I married my sister, but before any Alabama jokes start flying around, let me add some context. My dad passed away in a car crash when I was 2 years old, and my mother did not remarry until I was 7. The guy she married was an absolute awesome man, and one I called Dad for the first time. He was amazingly caring towards me and my mom, and would always be there for us. My mom was happy for the first time in years, and I finally had a role model I could follow, but he came as a package deal. He had a daughter that was exactly 1 year younger than me, and I mean exactly. Our birthdays were on the very same day. She just happened to be 1 year younger. As a young kid, I remember meeting her for the first time when they introduced us. My mom was dating him for a few months and wanted to wait to see how he would react, not only to a new dad, but to a new sibling as well. I remember laying my eyes on her and thinking, why is a fairy here? She was so beautiful that I was speechless for a few minutes, not knowing how to react, until my mom nudged me and said, well, aren't you going to say anything? I blubbered something that made my new sister giggle uncontrollably, and that was that. We had no problems whatsoever getting along, and everything was awesome. I had a new dad, a new sister, and my birthdays just became bigger and better, with a ton of new friends and lots more attention. Before, it was just me and my mom, and a couple of my friends. I didn't really have many friends at the time, and unlike the stereotype, my stepsister was an absolute joy to be around. She would play with me with whatever toys I wanted, and I would do the same. I didn't mind playing dolls with her. However, as time went on and we grew up together, our feelings also started to develop in a way that I was becoming worried. Well, let's just say that the inevitable happened, and by the time we were 16, 15, we had no choice but to come out to our parents. Much to our disbelief, they actually supported us, although I think I could see some raised eyebrows from our dad from time to time. The rest of the family, not so much. My mom's side was kind of neutral on the thing. They didn't really oppose us, but they never actually approved either. But my dad's side? Holy smokes. They were out for blood, calling me a monster, saying I was taking advantage of my sister, and telling me I was going to hell for defiling a young girl. We hadn't done anything yet. My dad's mom was one of those religious nut jobs that just laps up everything the church says and gives 20% of her income to the church, saying, it's to pay for my heavenly apartment. Yeah, right. It's more likely paying for the Reverend's new Porsche Cayenne. We were planning to get married after we graduate, and our grandmother pipes up, saying the church would never marry us, and that we would always be condemned to a life of sin. Yeah, she's like that. Well, fast forward to present day. We're happily married by the church. We have twin daughters that are about to turn 10. I own my own business. She's a chef in a 5-star hotel, and everything is going, smoothly. Nah, that'd be too easy. Our life is good, but our relationship with our dad's side of the family took a really dark turn. We did invite them for our wedding, but they chose to not come and would harass us for years until we moved to a different different city. Our dad kept our new address a secret from his side of the family for quite a while, and despite his and our attempts to actually get along with them, this fell flat on its face. They never wanted to be a part of our lives, nor the lives of their great-grandchildren, until 2 weeks ago. On our daughter's birthday, our dad called us saying that his mother would like to make amends, that she's dying and wants to meet her great-grandchildren before she passes. After some deliberation, we decided to move our girls' birthdays to our old house with our parents and get the family together. For a while, everything seemed to go quite well. We got some odd looks from some of the family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc., and some whispers here and there, but otherwise, it was going well. Happy birthday was sung, the cake was cut, and presents were opened. I was in the kitchen helping clean up when I hear a faint conversation coming from the living room. I thought everyone went home, so I creeped up to see who it was, when I hear dear grandmother talking to the twins. I got closer, when suddenly, I heard the phrase, "You are children of the devil." I turned the corner when I saw both my girls with a scared expression on their faces, and this monster of a woman insulting my children, telling them I forced myself on their mother, and saying we were all going to hell, especially them since they were born from sin. I immediately went ballistic on this woman, telling her to keep her lies to herself and to not utter another word. My wife was upstairs and ran down hearing the commotion. I explained what had just happened, and her face turned from confusion to pure anger. She went off on her grandmother, telling her that this was the last time she was seeing the girls, and hoped she had a good time because this was her last. We left without a word, and only the day after did I explain to our parents what had happened. Obviously, Mom was royally pissed, but somehow Dad already knew this was gonna happen, but decided not to say anything, which kinda annoyed me. But then again, I guess he wanted his mother to meet her great-grandchildren, even though she was more concerned in doing whatever the hell she wanted. Now, we have two very confused 10-year-old girls asking all sorts of questions, but then again, I suppose this day was near. We just thought we could wait until they were older before we could tell them. They actually understood the situation, and are now asking us how we got along as kids. They're really curious. Unfortunately, the grandmother is still around, and shows no signs of kicking the bucket anytime soon. I feel so sorry for you, but at the same time, I'm so glad that you found each other and got married. You guys sound like a really great couple, and I wish you all the best. It's pretty cool that your grandmother had to live with her son after her husband died. My grandparents did something similar. Your grandfather sounds like he was a really nice guy, too. Anyway, my point is that you two seem like very strong people who have been through a lot of tough times together. I think that your kids are lucky to have such an awesome set of parents. I hope things work out for your mother-in-law as well. She seems like she needs some help. My step-aunt and my step-cousin hate me for having a boyfriend, then bring my verbal abusive dad to a family gathering. A little bit of backstory. I met my boyfriend at a pride party during June of 2020, before my country went into lockdown. Over the lockdown, we started to get to know each other over text, and during the second to last week of lockdown, he asked me to watch a movie at a teen movie theater. They play movies teens and younger adults like, so I said yes. We have been happy for 7 months. But on to today. During the new year, my step-aunt invited me to go camp. I wanted to say no, but my mom said I had to, since I've had social issues and she wanted to help. So at least 2 days beforehand, I texted my boyfriend and told him what's happening. He knows I get homesick, and he did the sweetest thing and recorded audio for when I needed comfort or when I had a nightmare, since he knows how bad my nightmares can be, and he didn't want me wasting phone credit on calling him at night. The day we left to go camping, I texted him quick before getting in the car. My step-cousin, who's the same age as me, asked, "Who are you texting, and why are they so important than your family?" I slightly rolled my eyes and replied, "Oh, my boyfriend. I was just texting him quick so he knows I'm okay." Her eyes suddenly widened, and then she tries to grab my phone. She was yelling for her mom, telling her, "Ope's trainee boyfriend is still with her." My stepdad grabbed my step-cousin and sat her in the car. He's a big buff dude, and I owe him a lot. He told my step-cousin to respect my choices, and also to respect my boyfriend. My step-cousin and step-aunt huffed as I got into the car and wanted to zone out. When we set up camp, I find out about disco that night, and anyone can go. I texted my boyfriend, asking if he can go, and he was excited, since he could use glow-in-the-dark face paint during the night. Later, when we ate dinner, my step-aunt found my sketchbook of all my art and looked through it, saying my art looked horrible, even though I learned from my sisters, my sister-in-law, and my art teacher, who spent time getting me to where I am. I grabbed my sketchbook and hid it in my tent so she couldn't get it. That night, when the disco started, my boyfriend showed up with the glow-in-the-dark face paint, and my step-cousin suddenly yelled, yelled, "OMG, it's the tranny." My boyfriend looked at me with wide eyes, and I went to my protect mode and yelled back, "What's wrong with you? Can't you respect the fact I'm in love?" And then she yelled something the whole disco heard over the startup music that made everyone look at her in disgust. She yelled, "How comes you get a boyfriend and I don't? You are a hoe for having a trans one. You should break up with him and then wait for me to date someone." The whole night, my boyfriend and I, after doing our face paint, stayed at the back, hugging each other as the music and fireworks went off. My boyfriend texted my mom and stepdad, and they helped me pack up my tent and gear in the middle of the night, and they said my boyfriend could stay over at our house while we calmed down. Well, after New Year's Day, on the 2nd day of January, my family was holding a gathering. My family, my sisters-in-law's family, my extended family, and my boyfriend's family were all there. Later, the step-aunt and her brat of a teen walk in uninvited, with my dad in tow. My dad and the females of the family don't have a great relationship, and you'll see why. But my step-aunt yelled out, "Everyone, meet my boyfriend." My 3 sisters, my mom and me looked at each other and froze. My stepdad went big bear mode, and my boyfriend was going full protective mode. They ruined everything. My step-cousin kicked my cat for not letting him pet her. My dad verbally abused every female there, even if he didn't know them, and my step-aunt went into my room and ripped down all the art I had on the walls. She even drew over my sunset art on the wall my sister-in-law painted while I was away on a school camp. My stepdad kicked all 3 of them out, and my boyfriend's family made sure we were all okay, since they were anxious about my older sister's mental health. She has panic attacks, and one of them was a coworker at the therapy office she goes to. When everyone was getting ready to leave, my boyfriend's caregivers told me I was allowed to stay over any time. I thanked them, and when my boyfriend and his family left, my sister-in-law's family told my sister-in-law's wife, that she was blessed with such a great stepdad. When everyone left my family, we all had a family meeting and blocked my step-aunt on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and even blocked her contact. We all agreed that we needed to cut my dad out, since we were all hurt by the verbal abuse. My nice step-aunt filed a police report, and that was the end. You sound like a really great person, with a great close family and boyfriend. It's great that they all supported you in this situation. It's quite obvious that your step-aunt's family was in some way jealous of you, having a boyfriend before them, and they tried to make themselves feel better by belittling you. I'm glad in the end your step-aunt's family took it too far and got themselves banned from your life. Entitled stepsister gets schooled for thinking she's entitled to my money. I was born and bred in country A, a Southeast Asian country where the minimum wage is around $2.50 an hour. However, my dad was working in a large conglomerate and was given a huge title, which makes the family look quite wealthy on the outside, although his spending habits was off the charts, and he'd have no savings at the end of the day. The old man had gone through a few series of marriages and divorces. Then, he finally settled down with a lady from country B, a former USSR country in Central Asia. The lady had a daughter from her previous marriage, and they both got absorbed into our family. When the old man passed away, Country A's law was to revoke the wife and daughter's residency and send them back to Country B. While mourning the old man's death, my uncle had agreed to take them in temporarily until their flights get settled, but the lady had given my uncle a very hard time. My uncle had to come up with the money from his own pocket because my old man had lost his high-paying job and all his retirement funds before his passing. During my dad's passing, I had migrated to Australia in search for a better life. However, I was really tight with money that I couldn't afford to buy a ticket to fly back and attend my old man's funeral. Several years had passed, and my stepmother plus stepsister had settled in their homeland. However, stepmom, who had caused trouble for my uncle and hates him with her whole guts, was smart enough to use her daughter to squeeze some cash out of my uncle, who has already retired and has limited retirement funds. As my uncle started cutting them off financially, they started contacting me, asking me not to forget them. I hadn't known about the issue between them and my uncle at that time. I managed to naturalize as an Australian citizen and secure a better paying job throughout the years. I saved up for a trip to Country as it was growing to be a tourist destination really quickly at that time, and that Country B had recently allowed Australian passport holders 3 months visa-free stay. And here, I thought that by visiting them, they could show me some sort of hospitality by showing me around their country country and that I could revisit some of their memories of my old man. What I get in return was that someone had stolen AU $400 out of my wallet and I had to explore the country all by myself. My stepsister's fiance was always trying to squeeze out beer money out of me as we hang out. As I got back to Australia, COVID-19 struck. They found an opportunity to get my sympathy in order to give them financial aid. Stepdaughter will always text me bad news about how everyone is losing their jobs and can't afford bread, etc. However, as soon as lockdown was lifted in country B, stepsister posted photos of her marriage with her fiance in a lavish wedding at a restaurant. At that point, I thought they would understand that as married couples, it is their responsibility to make money for themselves and not depend too much on others. I was wrong. As soon as she gave birth, she kept on sending me photos of her baby out of nowhere. It felt much more annoying rather than cute, because it is as if she's implying that her baby is my responsibility. The worst part is whenever I post photos of holidays or buying new items, she would immediately send me messages asking me how I'm doing, followed by how bad the economy is in country B and how everyone is at the verge of losing their jobs. So immediately, I thought to myself that I shouldn't give her any more leniency. I started schooling her about responsibilities and how I'm no longer going to be involved in their lives. My relationship between them should have ended the day my old man passed away, and that all entitlements to our family's wealth, we didn't have any left to inherit, is no longer theirs. Now, the stepsister stopped messaging me. She probably told her mother that I'm finally cutting the cord between us, the cord that should have been severed the day my old man died. And just because I live and work in Australia, it doesn't mean that I'm ridiculously rich. The spending power of the Aussie dollar may be quite strong when going into some countries, but people forget that everyone, no matter what country they're working in, are all average income earners. You earn $700 a week. You spend almost $650 a week on weekly expenditures, especially if you're a migrant worker living by yourself with no family to turn to if you lose your job. So yes, I suggest cutting all ties with those not related to you by blood if the marriage had ended either by divorce or death. Kindness isn't going to teach entitled idiots like these people responsibility. I'm so sorry to hear about your dad and what you had to go through with your family. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for you, but I'm glad that you were able to get out of it. It's great that you've made a life for yourself in Australia and are doing well for yourself. It's also good that you tried being kind and setting boundaries with your family rather than being bitter towards them. Unfortunately, they couldn't do the same and obviously only see you as a human wallet. Now that you have cut them out, you can fully focus on your own life and happiness. With that, I wish you the best of luck. Karen accused me of spying on her with my hearing aid, despite me providing proof that it was just a medical device. She refused to take responsibility and demanded I be removed from the store. Here's what happened. It was just a typical Friday evening, and I decided to head to the grocery store to pick up some essentials. I was feeling a bit tired from a long week of work, but I was determined to get everything I needed and head home for a relaxing weekend. As I was walking through the aisles, I heard someone calling out to me from behind. I turned around to see a middle-aged woman with a cart standing there with a scowl on her face. "Excuse me, but you just bumped into my cart," she said in a tone that suggested she was accusing me of something. "Oh, I'm sorry about that," I replied, trying to be polite. "I didn't see your cart there." "Well, you should have been paying attention," she retorted. I tried to explain that it was an accident and that I apologized, but she wouldn't let it go. She kept insisting that I was being careless and that I needed to be more aware of my surroundings. I apologized again and tried to walk away, but she blocked my path with her cart. At this point, I was starting to get frustrated. I didn't think I had done anything wrong and I didn't appreciate her attitude, but I decided to just brush it off and move on. I turned around and started to walk away, but she wasn't done yet. "Excuse me, sir," she called out to a store manager who was passing by, "but this person bumped into my cart and then refused to take responsibility for it." The store manager, a middle-aged man, came over to try and mediate the situation. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked. "This person bumped into my cart and then refused to take responsibility for it," the woman, who I now knew as Karen, repeated. I tried to explain my side of the story, but Karen interrupted me. "And what's that thing in his ear? It looks like some kind of recording device," she said, pointing to my ear. The store manager looked at me, confused. "I'm sorry, sir, but what is she talking about?" It was at this point that the realization hit me. Karen was referring to my hearing aid. "That's my hearing aid," I said, feeling a mix of embarrassment and anger. The store manager looked at me skeptically. "Are you sure it's not some kind of recording device? She seems pretty convinced that it is." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I assure you, it's just a hearing aid. I've had it for years and it helps me hear better," I said, trying to keep my cool. Karen, however, was insistent. "I know what I saw. It looks like some kind of recording device, and I want it removed, she said, her voice rising. The store manager looked back and forth between Karen and me, unsure of what to do. I could tell he was starting to side with her, and I knew I had to do something to prove my innocence. I pulled out my hearing aid manual and my medical ID card, both of which clearly state that it was a hearing aid. The store manager looked at the evidence, his expression changing to one of embarrassment. I apologize, sir. I can see now that it is indeed a hearing aid, he said, turning to Karen. I'm sorry, but there's been a misunderstanding here. This is just a hearing aid and there's no recording device. But Karen was not satisfied. I still don't trust it. I want it removed, she said, crossing her arms. I couldn't believe the audacity of this woman. I had provided proof that it was just a hearing aid, but she still refused to believe it. I decided that enough was enough, and that I didn't need to put up with this kind of behavior. Ma'am, I assure you that this is just a hearing aid. It's not a recording device, and it's not harmful in any way, I said, trying to reason with her. But Karen was not swayed. I saw something on Fox News about these devices emitting radiation and being potentially harmful. I don't trust it, and I want it removed, she said, her voice growing louder. The store manager's expression changed to one of concern. Ma'am, I assure you that there's no scientific evidence to support these claims. This is just a hearing aid, and it's not harmful in any way, he said, trying to calm her down. I want it removed, and I want to speak to your manager, she said, her voice rising. The store manager looked at her, his expression one of annoyance. I literally am the manager, that's why I'm here, he said, his tone sarcastic. Karen's expression changed to one of disbelief. You're the manager? Well, then I demand that this man's hearing aid be removed, she said, pointing to me. The store manager rolled his eyes. Ma'am, I've already told you that this is just a hearing aid. It's not a recording device, and it's not harmful in any way. I suggest you leave and continue your shopping elsewhere, he said, his tone firm. Karen's expression turned to one of anger. I will not be spoken to in this manner. I demand to speak to your superior, she said, her voice rising. The store manager's expression changed to one of frustration. I am the highest authority here, and I'm telling you to leave, he said, his tone forceful. Karen, however, was not backing down. She got up in the manager's face and started to shout, I demand justice. I demand this man's weird device be removed. The store manager's patience was wearing thin. Ma'am, I've already told you that this is just a hearing aid. It's not a harmful radiation device, and I suggest you leave and continue your shopping elsewhere, he said, his tone firm. But Karen was not satisfied. I'll be telling the local press about this. This store is endorsing harmful radiation devices, and I won't stand for it, she said, her voice rising. The store manager's expression changed to one of frustration. Ma'am, I'm not going to repeat myself. This is just a hearing aid, and it's not harmful in any way. I suggest you leave before I call security, he said, his tone forceful. But Karen was not backing down. She continued to shout and cause a scene. The manager quickly called security, and Karen was escorted out of the store. As I watched her being led away, I couldn't believe the audacity of this woman. She had caused a scene, accused me of spying on her, wasted the store manager's time, and had the audacity to threaten to contact the press. It was clear that she was just another entitled Karen who thought the world revolved around her. I couldn't help but feel angry and frustrated as I continued with my shopping, the memory of the encounter still fresh in my mind. As I walked through the aisles, I couldn't shake off the feeling of embarrassment and injustice. I couldn't believe that I had been singled out and accused of something so ridiculous, simply because of my hearing aid. I do think there's a silver lining to the story. Sounds like the manager was very understanding and supportive of you and your hearing aid. It also sounds like he stood up for you and made sure that this Karen woman left the store without causing any more trouble. He could have just as easily ignored her accusations or backed them up instead of standing by you. And even though she was able to cause a scene in the store and embarrass you, it's clear she didn't get what she wanted because she was ultimately escorted out of the store by security. So, yeah, this experience was obviously very hurtful and frustrating for you. But it sounds like in the end, justice prevailed. You did nothing wrong. But in spite of that, the truth came out on top. A Karen and her family arrive at a hotel expecting preferential treatment. But when they don't get it, they start to act entitled and cause a ruckus. Here's what happened when security got involved. So I worked the graveyard shift as a security guard for a small private company, and one of the places I've worked security for was at 2 hotels. One thing I do while I'm at work is to try to be respectful and give someone the benefit of the doubt, especially when there's supposedly only one witness to something going on. I also try and be as respectful as I can be, even when the person or people I'm dealing with are being uncooperative and belligerent. One of the things I do when I first get on shift is to talk to the front desk of the first hotel I would guard and see if they need anything before I begin my patrols for the night. And I always checked in with the front desk as often as I could so they knew I was there to help if needed. I would then walk over to the second hotel and do the same thing. Most of the time, they would ask me to go to a room and knock to let the guests know they were being a little too loud and that there was a noise complaint. And the guests would usually apologize, then quiet down for the night. This night in question, I had to deal with 3 entitled parents. One thing about the hotel is that the lobby closes to the public at 9 p.m., so that means any large gatherings are prohibited from continuing at that time. And that is the time I would start work. I grabbed a radio so the hotels could contact me at any moment they needed security. I would walk from the first hotel after having let them know that I was on duty, and I would make my way over to the second hotel and do the same thing. When I checked in with the front desk of the second hotel, the clerk behind the desk asked if I could talk to a group of adults who had been drinking and were getting very loud. I calmly and respectfully told them that they could continue their party in their rooms, but they had to vacate the lobby as it was officially closed for the night. The clerk at the front desk had told me that she had tried to get them to quiet down and leave the lobby for the past 10 minutes, yet they complained that as guests they were entitled to stay in the lobby. They complained that the hotel had gotten security involved, and complained on their way back to the rooms, but left the lobby. I began my patrols when I got a call less than 30 minutes later at the same hotel because someone had complained that children were running in the halls. The hotel was currently hosting a sports event, and many kids on the sports team were there. The clerk behind the front desk had me meet her in the lobby, and we went to the room we believed the children were. When I saw the kids, they said that they had all been outside until a moment ago, when they came back to the room, which I could verify is true. The kids then said that they had seen two kids that appeared to be twins running through the hallways. The clerk leaned her back and gave an exhausted sigh and told me that she had gotten all day about these two kids, and she believed that the parents were in the group that had been kicked out of the lobby earlier. I walked around the hotel to see if I could find the room the kids were in and was stopped by hotel maintenance and told that they had seen those kids running away from the floor I was on, and that the fire retardant cases were all open, and one appeared to have been kicked in and was badly dented. I spotted the two kids in question, and they immediately went back to their room at a running pace when they spotted me. I found out what room they were in and reported everything to the clerk before going to the first and second floor to find out if any more damage had happened, and a guest had told me that they saw two twins running around the second floor, and I found all the cases open, except one that had been broken. It was missing the handle and the glass was cracked. I went to the lobby and showed the pictures of all the damage done, and the clerk called her manager directly at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night. For those who don't know, most hotel management is never in on the weekends. The manager had said that these kids and their parents needed to leave immediately and charge the room for all damages done to the hotel. I waited until 10:30 p.m. to go to the room, hoping that parents would be back in the room. I went up to the room and knocked on the door, and one of the kids responded. The encounter went as followed. OP: Hello, I am security for the hotel. Are your parents in the room? Entitled kid: No. OP: Can you tell me where your parents are? Entitled kid: In another room. OP: Can you tell me what room they're in? The entitled kid told me what room the parents are in, and I immediately told the children to contact their parents and have them meet me up at the room. As soon as the door closed, I stepped away from the door, but kept it in the immediate view, and contacted the front desk and asked the clerk to wait with me since we were dealing with minors, and for safety reasons for all parties involved, and didn't want to deal with the "he was harassing us for no reason and stalking us all night" crap. The parents took 15 minutes to come to the room, as they expected me to leave the floor the children were on, and I was afraid they would run to another room and break more stuff on the way. The first thing that happened was the entitled father started yelling at me. Entitled father: What are you doing creeping outside of our children's room? OP: Hello, I'm a security officer with the hotel. I was asked to speak with you as your children have been accused of breaking hotel property. Friend of entitled parents: So you thought you would harass young boys? Do you get off on doing that or something? OP: Sir, your children have been accused of breaking hotel property, and because of the risk of them supposedly doing this again. My job here is that I am assigned to protect this hotel from such things, and as such, your children are considered a threat to the safety of the hotel. Entitled father: You have no right to be outside of their room. You should have come to speak to us at our room, not be a creep and stand outside their room like a fucking pervert. OP: Sir, they are classified as a threat with the accusations of the destruction of private property. As it stands, the hotel managers have made it clear that you're no longer guests here and you must leave the property immediately. Entitled mother: You have no proof that our children are behind this. They're perfectly behaved and they've been in the rooms all night. Unfortunately, as they kept trying to yell and talk over me, I was beginning to get irritated and was losing my polite attitude and started to become that extreme asshole security guard with the cop attitude that no one wants to deal with. OP: That's bullshit. I have hotel staff that has seen them outside of their room. I have guests in the hotel that have seen them outside of their room, and I've personally seen that they have been outside of their room. Entitled mother: Everyone else is lying and personally targeting our children, including you. There are many children here that could be the culprits behind these accusations, but you're just choosing to blame everything on our children. OP: I don't care if you believe me or not. You need to leave the property immediately. It is this moment that the entitled father got directly in my face and said, I don't have to do anything you say. We're not leaving. I work for the FBI. I looked at him and demanded he showed me his federal credentials, proving that he's part of the FBI. The state that I live and work in states that if you identify as a member of local or federal law enforcement or as a federal employee, you have to show your credentials, even if you live in another state. The entitled father said he didn't have to until I told him this exact same law. He then told me that he left them in the room and needed to get them. When I was able to confirm that they didn't want to leave, I calmly walked back to the hotel lobby, but not before the entitled friend said, "Go ahead and leave, you pervert. You know you're wrong and that you have nothing to prove." As soon as I was in the elevator, I got on the radio with another clerk at the front desk and told them to call the local sheriff's department and told her the entire encounter and explained that they were now trespassing on hotel property. While the clerk was on the phone, the night auditor came in and I briefed him on what was going on. The entitled father came down and began demanding the hotel give the family a full refund, or they were not leaving, and they couldn't do anything as he was FBI. He, unfortunately, severely scared the two clerks that were still on shift and made the night auditor nervous with this. And I told them to let law enforcement know that the man was claiming this and that I now feared he had a weapon on the property. Thankfully, they went back to their rooms after realizing that the hotel would not budge, and they stayed in their rooms for the rest of the night. I checked all the hallways just in case, but thankfully they remained clear for the rest of my shift. Law enforcement showed up around 3 in the morning, and when I explained everything to them, they became guarded, especially now that I said I feared the man was FBI and may have had a weapon on the property that was not registered in the hotel database. Law enforcement said that they could take the family away as they were trespassing, but there was little that could be done. The parents told the officers that I had not talked to the parents, nor had the hotel spoken to them about anything. The entitled father and his friend started demanding information from the hotel about the clerks involved and all my work information. I told them I was not allowed to legally give out any of my work information outside of the name of my work. It wasn't true, but the guy believed it and said he would contact my work and make sure my superiors hear about me and how I was a creep. The rest of the night was uneventful, and the entitled family stayed in their rooms. But that was because they didn't want to leave, and the night auditor was a nice guy and didn't want to kick the children out at 4 in the morning with nowhere else to go. Since the kids of these entitled parents were connected to a sports group, and there were about 10 to 15 rooms all connected under the group, the hotel decided to charge each room with the destruction of property and attached a report from both hotel staff and myself to make sure it was known why each room was charged over $500 in damages. One of the fun things about that night is that one of the sheriffs that showed up was a friend from high school that I haven't seen in over 10 years. It's nice to catch up with him and see that he was doing good. It's amazing how you're able to keep your cool and handle the situation. I think that was pretty brave of you. I'm glad you were able to get yourself out of there. Hopefully, things will go better for you from now on. My neighbors cut down our trees to improve their view. So this is not my story, but my parents. However, they don't know the internet, so I will tell this story to them. So I live with my parents as I'm only 14, and my parents decided they wanted a holiday house so they can work on and have to get away from life. When we moved in, we talked to the neighbor. On one side is nice neighbors, a lovely couple who have just moved into their first house, and on the other side are entitled neighbors who rent their house to any people who want to have parties. When we look around the garden, we see 3 very tall trees, healthy trees, which have probably taken about 200 years to grow. And as we are on a dip, these trees block the view of the house on the other side of the dip very well, from seeing into my parents' bedroom and bathroom, which doesn't have curtains on the windows. I think you can see what's about to happen. We have to go back to our other house so my mom can go back to work. When my mom gets a call from the nice neighbors, and this conversation ensued. "Hey, you need to come back right now. The entitled neighbors are on your property with chainsaws, and I don't know what they're planning to do." "Wait, what? Can you stop them?" "I'm so sorry, but my ferry's about to leave, and I need to go to work. However, I can call the police if you want. I know all of them very well, so they will come quickly." "Yes, please. I will get my dad to get on the next ferry and get there as fast as he can." However, when the police got there, they were gone. I had just gotten out of school and caused my dad need to pick me up. I went with him to see what had happened. When we get there, we see this view. The 3 trees are gone, and what is left are 3 very hacked-at tree stubs and some glass. They had cut down our trees, and in the process smashed part of the glass wall around the deck. Hearing chainsaws, we look over. There's no fence yet. We see 3 mid-30 men cutting wood up probably for firewood. This is when the entitlement really starts. "Hey, why'd you cut down our trees?" "Oh, hey, we were just looking over to your side, noticed that if these trees fell, they could really mess up your house. And being new neighbors, we thought we should do the neighborly thing of cutting them down for you. Sorta new neighbors helping each other out." "What? Those trees were really healthy. Also, you trespassed and cut down our tree without our consent. We're calling the police on you." The neighbor got so angry at my dad for saying this. "What the heck, dude? We improved your view and made sure the trees wouldn't hit your house. We helped you. Why to call the police?" Now, my dad hates being called dude. It's like swearing to him. So him getting angry, also being a lot stronger and bigger than him, so he just walked inside while I stay standing there not really knowing what to do. Then the oldest, like 40 years old, looks at me and says, "Hey, sweetie, if you stop your dad from calling the police, we'll give you an ice cream." I just turned around and walked inside as the way he said it was so creepy. Fast forward about a week, and we find out that the trees they cut down actually blocked their view of the sea, and them cutting the trees down helped their rental. They've been fined a lot of money, and have to do some community work as well as pay us enough money to put up a fence so that we don't have to see them anymore. Entitled neighbors have also started to rent us out, so hopefully we don't ever have to see them again. Edit. I just found this out and needed to share it. 1. My mom has added trees, but they will take about 100 years to grow tall. 2. We're figuring out the boundary so that we can plant bushes so the fence is harder to build, though that does unfortunately mean I can't paint it. 3. For everyone saying build a high fence to block their view, the fence would have to be about 5 meters tall, and the build limit is 2.5 meters. 4. Turns out they have a dog. They used to poo on our and a nice neighbor's yard, so nice neighbors are prepared to watch them build this fence while we are not at the house to make sure they don't do anything wrong. I can't believe they would go that far. And to offer an ice cream after they'd done something so horrible? I hope you talked to your neighbors about it. They should have been punished more for this. What a bad neighbor. But at least you found out now the fence is going up. That's great. Thank you for sharing the story with us. It was very interesting to read. Because my brother is autistic, my entitled parents say he's allowed to act inappropriately toward me without any consequences. I am disgusted. Here is how it all went down. My parents, dad is 54 and my mom is 52, are angry with me for not ignoring my older brother's, 32, predatory behavior. Just a little context about my older brother and the situation at hand. My brother is 32 years old. He's never had a job. He dropped out of community college after 2 semesters for never doing his assignments. He's lived with my parents his entire life. He sleeps all day and stays up all night playing video games and watching porn. Both my brother and I, 27-year-old male, are diagnosed autistic and present our symptoms similarly, but I've been working since I was 17. Got my driver's license at 17, bought my first car at 24, and started college in 2019. My parents constantly use my brother's autism as an excuse for his appalling behavior, even though we're both on the spectrum. In November of 2020, I moved back in with my parents because I left an abusive relationship and had chronic health issues. I met my current girlfriend, 23-year-old female, in mid-2021, and in early 2022. She had some extenuating circumstances where my family agreed to let her live with us. My brother was immediately pleased with this development, but just as quickly behaved inappropriately. It started off with him creepily staring anytime my girlfriend and I kissed, progressed to him following my girlfriend into the bathroom anytime he saw her go in there for a shower, until he figured out she always locked the door because of him. And the straw that broke the camel's back was him trying to come into our bedroom uninvited and without knocking at 3 in the morning while we slept. Every time he behaved inappropriately, we mentioned it to my parents. But all that really happened were excuses made for him, because he's autistic, and brief conversation with him about not doing those things again, and then him still doing whatever he wanted. Anyway, after the bedroom incident, they kicked my girlfriend out, making her homeless for a brief period of time, because she had a PTSD panic attack since my brother made her feel unsafe. As a result of this, my girlfriend and I got an apartment together, and I moved out too, because I didn't want to be in the same house as my brother. I was upset with the way my girlfriend was treated, and I wasn't willing to break up with her, which my parents wanted me to do. I had a calm conversation with my parents, explaining why I was moving out, where I explained it's their house, so they are more than entitled to make rules concerning their own home. However, I was not going to continue living somewhere my girlfriend wasn't welcome, and where my brother's predatory behavior was condoned. At first, they told me they love me. They're sorry they ever made me feel that way. They want me to keep a key to the house because I'm always welcome over, and that if I ever needed to move back in, I could. Several days later, I went over to pick up some more of my things, only to find that my parents had changed the locks on the door. Later that same week, they tell me they're angry with me for being ungrateful, saying I hate them, and calling them bad parents, none of which I ever said. They went on to tell me that they didn't want to speak to me for a week because they were upset, needed time to process, and because they thought I needed to feel what it was like to be cut out of the family. I respected their wishes, and later my parents agreed to family therapy, which they quickly backed out of because they were only willing to do it over a 3-way video call, and my therapist website wasn't able to do that. I'm not sure why, but my therapist said it wasn't doable, at which point I told my parents I would be willing to attend family therapy with a therapist of their choice, who could do the 3-way video call, but that had yet to happen. That same Sunday, my parents invited me over for dinner, which I thought went well, only to find out they would continue to dodge my calls and leave my texts on read after that night. They eventually contacted me and told me to stop using their house as storage and pick up my things, despite requesting that I stay away for a week. My girlfriend and I go over to pick up the rest of our stuff, which was awkward but quick. Later that day, I got a text from my mom wishing me luck at college, but my parents still aren't willing to talk about the issues that led to me moving out, or even to come over to see our new apartment, after being invited over because, despite the circumstances, I still love them and want a relationship with them since this type of behavior is highly uncharacteristic of them. Understandably, my girlfriend isn't fond of them, but told me she doesn't mind me inviting my parents over because it's important to her that I have a relationship with my parents, for the sake of my mental well-being. Has anyone else ever dealt with a situation similar to this? If so, how did you deal with it? The original poster gave an update a couple days later. I've been working through some things in therapy, and I had a bit of an epiphany. For years, I thought my parents were doing me a favor by letting me live with them, but things started to unravel the more I thought about it and talked to my therapist. I'm currently 27, but I didn't start living on my own until I was 22, and always thought I was a failure or a late bloomer. But then I remembered I tried moving out on my own when I was 20. I found a friend who was willing to be my roommate at the time, and we were apartment hunting together. I eventually told my parents I wanted to move out, and my mom told me they wouldn't be willing to afford the rent for their apartment if I wasn't there to pitch in. And my dad asked me, "How are you going to find a roommate? You can't even find someone to hang out with on your birthday." When I lived with them, I didn't give them all my money from work, but I could never save more than $500 because they would inevitably fall behind on some bill, and I would have to help, and a lot of times I didn't have the money to help, so it was normal for me to sell my things at a pawn shop to pitch in, which was never asked of my older brother. I only had to stop contributing to my parents' finances once we were homeless in 2018, and reconnected with my extended family who let me couch surf, and they told my parents they thought it was weird I gave them so much money. When my parents lived in New York, I lived alone in Texas for 2 years. I was actually thriving, with the exception of my abusive ex and chronic health issues. I dropped 120 pounds. I was on the honor roll at my college. I bought a car. I was doing so well. Later, my mother admitted to me she was actually angry and resentful toward me for getting my first job at 17 because the government took away my disability money that she was managing. I feel like that's one reason my older brother is still treated as the golden child. He still gets disability that my mom manages 100% and is fairly obedient to her. It just made me think, wow, sorry I'm such a disappointment because I wasn't an obedient little disability check for you, and I wanted a life of my own. I was also sexually abused in first grade by a neighbor's teenage son, and when I asked my mom why she wasn't more protective of me, she said, "I was so concerned with making sure that never happened to your brother that it never occurred to me that it could happen to you." I used to think my parents were very moral and ethical people, but the more therapy I go to, the more I'm noticing patterns. For example, my mom was always doing research on narcissists and claiming that all my grandparents were narcissists, and that's why we want no contact with them for over a decade, which at the time when I was a kid, I believed her. But then I realized a classic narcissist tactic is to isolate people from others who can help them. I even remember being a freshman in high school and my mom terrifying me by convincing me my grandfather had hired private investigators to stalk us, which, knowing my grandfather now that I'm an adult, is something he'd never do. Sorry for the rant, but I needed to get this out somewhere. A few days later, the original poster gave another update. My parents have been very low contact because they're salty I didn't dump my girlfriend and excuse my brother's creepy behavior. During this whole situation, my grandfather has been nothing short of a rock for me. He and my step-grandmother have been offering me advice, help me get career counseling services, wants to help with my tuition now that I'm back in college, and have offered to buy plane tickets for both my girlfriend and I to fly cross-country to spend Thanksgiving with them, and get the opportunity to introduce my girlfriend to them. He's been very clear that he sides with me on the disagreement with my parents, because he doesn't agree with my brother's behavior, and has stated the obvious, that my parents don't seem to grasp that I'm a grown man and can date who I want and live my life as I see fit. I feel really lucky to have him around, but at the same time, I'm still incredibly frustrated with my parents. I have a large extended family, and I've heard through the grapevine that my parents want me to move back with them, but on their terms. And they're going low contact with me to teach me a lesson. And all I can think is, WTF kind of delusional fairy tale world do they live in where I would abandon a healthy relationship with my girlfriend and having my own place to moving back in with them just to be the scapegoat for all of my brother's BS? I'm sorry you've been through all of that. I hope your parents will come around soon. That's awful what your brother did to you. You should have called the police. It sounds like you've been doing a good job of taking care of yourself and focusing on your own goals, though. I can't believe how well your grandfather has supported you through this whole thing. That's really cool that he wants to meet your girlfriend and help with your tuition. Good for him. My 6-year-old sister burned the house down while I was babysitting her, and my entitled parents tried to make it my fault. I was 9 at the time. Here's how it went down. When my sister was 6, she set the backyard on fire. Evil Mama Bear blamed me when she was at fault. At the time, I was more or less babysitting my sister while my parents were at work, but why they thought it was a good idea to have a 9-year-old babysit a 6-year-old is beyond me. It's one of the few things I did hold against my dad when I realized later how bad of an idea it was. But we were instructed to stay indoors while my parents were at work. My sister, being the hyperactive brat she was, loved to screw with me. If I even so much as put her in timeout, she'd tell our mother, EMB. And then, EMB would try and punish me for it. I set up my sister to play video games in the den, and just went to the living room for a while to play my Game Boy Color, and be left alone. I left the Game Boy's volume low just so I could keep an ear out. Things seemed fine. But after a few minutes, my sister ran into the room and started jumping up and down on the couch like it was a trampoline. I told her to stop, but she blew me a raspberry. Big mistake while jumping, and she bit her tongue. Then started crying that I'd hurt her and ran to her room sobbing. I called my dad to let him know what had happened. He groaned and said it wasn't my fault, and he'd deal with EMB later if she blamed me for it. Well, EMB did blame me for it. My sister had really hurt her tongue or something because she was talking with a lisp for days. EMB was ready to ground me, so I called Dad and put him on the phone with her, and together we explained it wasn't my fault. I told her to stop jumping on the couch, and she kept doing it anyway, so she did it to herself. EMB was furious and told me to just get out of her sight, and I did. Making myself scarce had become a talent at that point. Fast forward to late summer, the driest time of the year. I was doing my usual routine of making sure my sister was situated entertaining herself, then went to another room to play my Game Boy. I noticed after a while things seemed too quiet, so I got up to check on Sis when she suddenly came running in through the back door, screaming and crying to me on broken English from her tongue lisp that she'd goofed up. The moment she mustered out the word fire, I was running outside. A whole patch of dry grass and a part of the back fence were on fire. I got the hose and sprayed it down until it was all out. The fence was a little scorched, but otherwise okay. And none of the neighbors were home, so they didn't see. When I was confident the area was sufficiently soaked, I looked around and found a soggy box of Easy Light matches on the ground near my dad's barbecue. The lid was also off the barbecue. I picked up the matches and went back inside to ask my sister what she'd done, but didn't want to tell me. But I made her spit it out. She was playing with the matches over Dad's barbecue, but lit one too fast and dropped it. Then it set the ground on fire, so she came and got me. I called Dad to tell him what happened, and he rushed home. He hugged us both and repeatedly asked if we were okay. I said I was, but my sister wouldn't stop crying. Dad then called EMB to tell her what happened. And when she later came home from work, she ran straight to me and looked like she was geared up to slap me. But with Dad right there near me, she instead just started yelling at me. She was saying that it was all my fault, and that I should have been watching my sister constantly. Well, Dad didn't stand for that. Then he started grilling EMB over the fact that she had left the matches on the counter, because she'd used them for scented candles. Yeah, that's right, she left them out, and that's how Sis got them. My parents ended up arguing because EMB wanted to punish me for what happened, but my dad refused to let her, and even called her out on the fact that she just leaves Sis in another room and barely checks on her when she's home, and watching her as well. So EMB said we needed to go back to using a babysitter for a while. Dad agreed to that, and that's how we got Mindy, the teenage girl who babysat us for roughly a year. She was nice and pretty much my first crush, too. But she eventually left because EMB drove her nuts trying to micromanage everything over the phone. Dad made sure after that anything like matches and lighters were on lockdown in a place my sister couldn't get at them. So, as far as I know, Sis never got to play with matches like that again. Not long after the incident, my dad and I repainted the fence and spread some grass seed around the yard, so the whole incident was forgotten pretty quickly. I'm not even sure the neighbors noticed because the fire didn't make it to their side of the fence, and they'd have to look over a 6-foot fence into our yard to see. EMB still held to the belief it was all my fault for some time, though, and tried to say that to anyone who'd listen. I had to correct her for years that she was the one who left the matches out, and tried to pin everything on me as soon as she got home. I would also mention the near slapping. I had my story so down pat that I'd turn into a motor mouth until it was all stated out loud. The fact I had to have a memorized speech about it tells you how prepared I was dealing with EMB. Even back then, I corrected her once in public when she was gossiping with some other women at a party, and she nearly went off on me and covered my mouth. After that scene, I don't think those women spoke to her ever again. Eventually, she stopped bringing up the story and just focused on other things she blamed me for. I'm sorry you had to go through all that. Original poster, I've been in a similar situation, and I don't think there's any way to deal with it without losing some friends. Karen called the cops on me for buying the last PS5. I had gone to the local Bullseye looking to pick up a few things with my cousin, Tom, for a long night of gaming, as neither of us had anything to do that Friday or Saturday night, and the then new COD Vanguard had just released. Not knowing how terrible this game was, we were hyped to get in as many hours as we could. As I carry my basket with balls, Doritos, and the biggest bag of pizza rolls I've ever seen, I happen to notice a singular PS5 sitting behind the glass in electronics. Walking up to Tom, I asked if he was planning on getting it, and he wasn't interested. He already has the new Xbox, so that's fair. I send Tom to fetch an employee so I can collect my overpriced prize. Looking forward to those PS exclusives over the coming months. Everything goes swimmingly, and I've bought the PS5. No sooner than I grab the bag and pick it up, a woman approaches. We'll name her Susan, as she wasn't good enough at her craft to be dubbed Karen. Susan interjects the closing niceties between myself and the store clerk with a panicked, "Excuse me?" The three of us turn, and the store employee asks if he can help. Susan says no. That will not be needed, as she's looking to chat with me. I make sure she's aware I am not a member of the Bullseye staff. Susan confirms she knows this, as her voice continues to feign sweetness. Susan says, "I see you have the last PS5 they have in stock. Were you going to buy that?" To which I responded, "Actually, I already did. I'm stoked to finally have one." Susan replies, "No, no, no! You can't have it! I need it! I'll pay you double what you paid for it!" Now look, if I hadn't just spent ages trying to track one of these new systems down, I'd have just sold it to her at cost. But I wasn't able to find an RTX 3080, Xbox Series, or PS5 at this point, so no amount of money could have convinced me to part with it. I informed Susan, and she is absolutely not having it. All the feigned sweetness instantly gone. She demands I give her the PS5. Store employee interjects, telling Susan if she continues to harass customers, he will have to ask her to leave. Susan turns and says, "I don't care what you say, I'm going to get that PlayStation!" However, I did use this moment to slip Susan and make a break for the exit. Reaching my car, and just as we were pulling out of the space, we spot Susan running. Thinking nothing of it, I drop it into drive and putter to the exit. About a mile to a mile and a half after leaving Bullseye, I hear frantic honking from behind and look up. If you guessed, I saw Susan in her BMW SUV tailgating and swerving all over the highway, you'd be correct. Other than laughing with Tom, I ignored her entirely. Roughly 10 minutes pass, and she's still right there on my ass when I hear sirens and notice the telltale cherries and berries of a state police cruiser directly behind Susan. Rejoice. However, Susan pulls to the right lane, and the officer continues on. Now, he is directly on my bumper, and he's laying on the air horn being super obnoxious. So I pull over, and yep, he's there for me. Susan had also pulled over behind the officer, though I hadn't noticed. The officer approached me and treated me like a possible DUI, and explained they had received a call about my vehicle swerving all over the road and driving at erratic speeds. After a couple of back and forths, he was convinced everything was fine and started to tell me to have a nice day, when Susan out of nowhere screams, "Officer, arrest this man! He stole my PS5! I explained to the officer that I had bought the PS5 at Bullseye, and what had happened with Susan. The officer was extremely confused, but could see the PS5 sitting on the back seat within the car. He asked if I could prove that it was mine and that I did in fact pay for it, to which Susan said, "Absolutely not! He knows I bought it, and he grabbed it in the parking lot! Thank God you're here, officer!" So, having worked retail many years ago, I knew that my card number would be on the receipt. So I opened with, "Well, I also have the receipt, if that helps." Which Susan, the dim-witted bird she was, immediately jumped on, stating that I had stolen that out of her hands too. This is where I proudly exclaimed that all receipts show the last 4 digits of the card used to purchase things, as well as the first initial and last name of the card holder. Susan continued to state, "Yeah, and my name is on it!" I pulled my driver's license, bank card, and receipt out, handing them to the officer. Everything matched. The officer hands the bag, thanking me, and immediately turns to Susan, who is now screaming,
"Well, aren't you going to arrest him for being drunk? He was all over the road!"
Officer replies, "So you're the one who called us about a possible DUI?" Susan proudly exclaimed,
"Yes, now arrest him!"
The officer immediately pulled out his handcuffs and slapped them on Susan as she, with a voice full of fear, asked what the hell he was doing. Officer explained that Susan was under arrest for making a false report, misuse of 911, and my state's law on stalking. Now, while I got this wonderful PS5, Susan got her car towed, the full weekend in lockup, and when the dust finally settled, she pled guilty to making a false police report and harassment. I don't know what the terms were, but she was put on a 2-year probation and banned from the local bullseye until it was completed. You're a lucky guy, dude. I mean, it's pretty crazy that you had someone attempt to steal your PS5 and then manage to get them in cuffs without actually contacting the police yourself. I'm really glad you got some officers that did their job properly and checked everything out, then on top of that, did the right thing by not going easy on Susan, as she needs to be taught a lesson. Enjoy your time on the PS5. I'm sure it wasn't easy for you to secure it.